At this point, when we're talking about these healthy, natural things, let's call them pro-aging, because now we've changed our mindset, right? We're not trying to slow down aging. We are just trying to support our health while we age, because that's a normal part of our journey here on this earth.
Hey there, welcome to the Female Health Solution podcast, where we discuss women's health, hormones, and everything else in between. Join me as we dive into the tools that you need to live your healthiest life. All right, welcome back everyone to the Female Health Solution podcast. Today we've got Dr. Genevieve Newton. Welcome, Dr. Jen.
Thank you, Dr. Beth. How are you?
I'm good. Good. I am so excited to dive into stuff today. So I'm going to jump in. We're going to jump in with questions, right? I want to talk about the anti-aging market, what's going on there, and then some alternative solutions for people that are looking for them. So what is one of the most commonly used anti-aging treatments for people right now?
Well, we can really break these down into three categories. So you've got your least invasive category, which would be your topicals, right? And so that's going to be things like your vitamin C, your vitamin E, your ceramides, the retinols, all of those things that you put onto your face. And we all use those, right? Everybody has some of those in their medicine cabinet and their daily routine, right? Now, then we get into sort of the next level of invasiveness, which would be what we would call your ablative treatments. So those would be your chemical peels, your laser resurfacing, your microdermabrasion. And within that category, there's really a range of kind of intensity of how far down you're going to ablate the surface of the skin. The whole point of that is to essentially create damage to stimulate healing, which increases the synthesis of the collagen and the elastin and the structural proteins. But there's a cost associated with that, right? You have to do the damage in order to get the benefits on the end of it. And then we get to the group that, I would call these more invasive, but that being said, they don't create necessarily as much trauma as the ablative ones, but that's your injectable category. So you've got your Botox and your fillers. And then in that Botox category, we now don't just have Botox, we have some other Botox toxins that have a little bit of a different structure in terms of what's actually in them, but they do the same thing. So they create that same level of interference between the signal that goes from the nerve to the muscle. So essentially, it's a neurotoxin, right? It's a neurotoxin. That's what Botox does. And then fillers, you've got some different kinds of fillers. You have synthetic fillers, which I am absolutely not, I would not recommend those for anybody because they're not natural. They were used more of like a first generation. They're still used today, but not as much. The ones that are used more commonly are your natural fillers. So they mimic the proteins that we already have in our bodies, but they are obviously not mimicking them perfectly. There's some other stuff in there as well. So that's your three. Those are your three categories, and obviously they're pretty different when you look at what's going on in each one.
Yeah, one of the things, even starting with that first category with some of the topical things, I just heard something the other day because everybody talks about like retinol, blah blah blah, and then I heard somebody say, "Oh, but don't use it too much because it can actually thin your skin too much over."
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I was like, I thought it was supposed to be better for the anti-aging. Now it's going to thin my skin more. I don't want that.
Right. Well, again, it's this issue of long-term use, right? And that there's been a lot of research on retinol, and dermatologists have been using it for decades. But there's also very different levels of intensity of the retinol. So for example, if you go to see a dermatologist, they may actually prescribe you a retinol that's much stronger than what you would buy if you're just going to Shoppers Drug Mart and getting something, right? So they're actually, you're in the US, right, Beth? I shouldn't say Shoppers Drug Mart, Rexall. There's definitely some research that shows that intensity of the retinol over the long term can thin the skin. It does happen. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, we need to be, and this is it, right? We need to be very well informed and to use our common sense, right? And so, one of the things that I think is the most kind of striking difference between particularly the injectables and some of these other things, is that the injectables are trying to disguise what's going on, right? It is a total disguise because the Botox is paralyzing the muscles or decreasing the muscular contraction. The filler is putting this artificial volume into the face. Whereas I think from a common sense perspective, what we always want to look towards is use products or tools, which we can talk about some of those later, that actually help to strengthen the integrity of the structures that we're working with. So whether that be your face, your neck, your hands, whatever part of your body you're trying to, minimize the signs of aging, you want to work with from a holistic health perspective in the same way that you do with anything else.
Yeah. Which makes sense. But then why isn't that something that they recommend more? Right.
Well, I think the reality is that that's not necessarily a particularly profitable market. There's certainly profit to be made in there. But if you're investing in something like face yoga or a red light therapy device that you're using on your skin, or you're practicing really good sleep hygiene and good diet and nutrition and supplementation, which is critical for your skin health, right? It's not nearly as profitable. I mean, anybody that's had Botox and filler can tell you those are expensive processes. Filler in particular, thousands of dollars every year. If you get into that cycle of, doing it on a yearly basis, you are spending in the thousands. And also, I mean, we know how expensive some of these topicals are, right? They're incredibly expensive. So, and then the other part of it is, if we're honest, how many people really have that approach to their life in general, right? From a diet perspective and exercise. I think certainly we're seeing so many more people embracing that commitment to a holistic lifestyle. But I don't think that we're probably looking at the majority yet.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I would agree on that. Not the majority.
Yeah.
So in talking about some of these things with the injectables, what are some of the risks that are associated with getting something like that? Because I'll be totally honest, I have seen some people post adverse reactions. Absolutely. And that I have never done an injection, and because I'm a little afraid.
Yeah. I think there are a remarkable number of potential adverse events, and you can break them up into different categories. So when I look at kind of how these things play out, you've got your short-term and then your long-term effects. And we'll get to the long-term, but let's talk about the short-term. And in the short-term, you can break it down further into kind of minor and then moderate and then severe adverse events. So your minor ones would be, you're injecting something, you're going to have potential for bruising and pain, a little bit of swelling at the injection site. Maybe you even get a little bit of an infection. That's kind of on the more minor range infection. We're getting into the moderate. But then in the moderate, you can have a more severe infection. You can have an allergic reaction. You can have, with Botox particularly, visual problems, because a lot of the Botox gets injected into this face and forehead area that's very close to the visual system, right? And so it's a neurotoxin. It can travel. And so people have consequences like dry eye, blurred vision. There have even been issues of blindness and retinal detachment. That has also happened. Visual problems can happen with filler in this area as well. If we're talking about what's going on from a more severe perspective, filler can occlude a blood vessel, right? Filler is a solid structure. If it's incorrectly injected into a blood vessel, and this is where the most significant number of problems that are, quite serious happen with filler. So the blood vessel will get occluded, and as a result, it can't give blood to the tissue that it's supplying. So that tissue, if that problem is not resolved quickly, can die. And so if you go to the scientific literature and you start looking at pictures, you will see pictures of like black necrotic tissue in people's faces as a result of having, it's a very serious consequence. And it's the reason why, if you're going to get filler, absolutely need to go to someone who is well qualified. So preferably a medical doctor, a dermatologist. There are some very good nurses who practice this as well, but you need to go to somebody who knows what they're doing, and that there's very clear, indication of what you're looking for problems, the kind of follow-up that you would have. But they're really, things can get pretty severe with Botox. And I'll ask you a question, Beth. Did you know that Botox has a black box warning on it?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So black box warning since 2008, because Botox can travel systemically throughout the body and cause botulism. Yes. Botulism can cause paralysis. It can cause respiratory failure. It can cause death. It doesn't happen often, obviously, or this procedure would not be popular the way it is and being done as frequently as it is. But it has happened. It does happen. And so there's a consumer advocacy group that over the last year has been really working to get this black box warning more prominent. I suspect that they will have some success. That being said, most people who have had Botox have no idea that this is a possibility. So that's really your category of kind of the more immediate things. Oh, I forgot to mention nerve damage. Absolutely, any injection can cause nerve damage because it's an injectable. But when we get into the delayed effects, this is where I think that things kind of get interesting. So, for example, Botox, when used repeatedly over a period of time, because of its mechanism of action, where it's decreasing the signal from the nerve to the muscle, that muscle can atrophy. And so if you look back historically at the early uses of Botox, it was being used mostly medically for things like excessive sweating and also migraines. And so the individuals that were getting it for migraines were getting it injected into this area around the eye. So it sort of fans out around the eyes. And what was found as a result of that was something called an hourglass depression. So it looked like people's heads had a little bit of an hourglass shape because the temples caved in. And the reason they caved in was because the muscles atrophied. And so I learned this in all of my research about, this industry and what was happening. And just for the heck of it, I started looking at websites like Real Self, where you can go in and ask questions of medical doctors, right? So people would go in and ask medical doctors, well, I heard that there was a risk of muscle atrophy with Botox. Is this a problem? And I was absolutely shocked that the responses were quite consistently saying, no, this isn't a problem, number one. And two, if it does happen, it's okay, it's reversible. And the reason I find that so shocking is because if you go back 30 years and you start looking at the medical literature on the way this is being used, it was so clear that this is what was happening. And it was accepted as a side effect because people had their migraine intensity reduced, and this was what the purpose of it was. And so they accepted that as a consequence. But to not tell women that this is something that could happen is deeply disturbing to me. And so, when you start to think about it, well, let's say you're putting Botox into your forehead, and the muscles in your forehead are designed to basically hold your forehead up, right? And so if the muscles atrophy and you stop using Botox, now you're going to have a much worse situation than you would have if you hadn't started using it in the first place. Could you strengthen those muscles after the fact? Perhaps, I'm sure to some extent, but would the damage be irreversible, or would it be reversible? I don't know. And I don't think that that's a risk that a lot of people are aware about. Another thing that can happen with Botox is, and this is again research from this medical use of using a much higher dose, people can actually develop resistance to Botox. So they develop antibodies, and this can happen over time. So let's say you've been getting Botox successfully for 5 years, 7 years. Now you get it and it's not working. And the reason that can happen is because you can develop antibodies. And so I picture this double whammy scenario of muscle atrophy and your forehead's drooping and your cheeks are drooping. And now you have Botox resistance. And so, well, sorry, you're going to have to deal with this now. For filler, and this is fascinating, you and I as medical professionals will find this intriguing. So filler can develop, even acutely, you can have all these negative aesthetic outcomes. I didn't talk about those as adverse events because they're not medical, but we've all seen the aesthetic problems that result from asymmetrical injections, for example, things like that. So with filler, people can get sort of these little lumps, and that can happen. But the fascinating thing about what can happen over time is that even years later, when you really don't see the filler anymore, there can be activation of these little nodules from the filler. And it's usually in response to an infection, some sort of immune system activation. And so this brings up this whole question of, do we have autoimmune and immune mediated reactions to the injection of Botox and fillers? And this, I think, is an open question. It's hard to find answers to it. I looked very hard. I found one reference from a doctor online saying that a study found that people with autoimmune conditions that got Botox, about 32% of them had a flare-up. I couldn't find the primary source. So I don't know where that reference came from. I don't know if it was a good quality study, but I do definitely recommend that if somebody has an autoimmune condition, at the very least, do not get any injectable while you're in a flare-up. That's really not a good idea, especially since we know that there's these delayed nodules that can develop, which means that there's something going on. You maybe heard during COVID, there were women that were getting COVID vaccines and they were having swelling around the area where they had filler, as well as in people who had breast implants. There was like massive inflammation of the lymph nodes and the tissues. So again, just really a lot of uncertainties, right? And so these are things that I don't think people are well advised about at all. And so if you're going to make the decision to do this, I think the most important thing is that you at least are going into it with your eyes open as to what the potential consequences are.
Yes. Potential consequences for all of that. I had not heard that about fillers or Botox and having autoimmune issues, but it makes complete sense.
Of course it does. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Something else that people sometimes get themselves into a little bit of a pickle with filler in this asymmetrical injection, or just getting something that's a result that they aren't happy with. So with Botox, you can't go in and reverse it. There's no reversing it. You just have to wait it out. But with filler, the doctors will tell you that there is a reversible, it's not a big deal. You just come in, and what we're going to do is inject hyaluronidase, which breaks down, as long as it's a hyaluronic acid filler, which many of the ones that are being used are. So you can inject this enzyme that's going to break down the filler. And so you can, counteract these problems pretty easily. What they don't tell you is that there's no difference between the action of the hyaluronidase enzyme on the hyaluronic acid in the filler and your own hyaluronic acid. So there's also no way of controlling the spread of that enzyme. So let's say you had filler into your cheek area and it was overfilled, or you had lumps or something that yet you weren't happy with. You went back to the doctor, they injected the hyaluronidase. Now it can travel throughout this area. And yes, it will dissolve the filler, but it can also break down your own volume. So you can end up in a much worse situation than you would have been when you go into it. So again, not something that people are aware of. They think this is great. It doesn't look right. I'll just get it dissolved. And it doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yeah. Ugh. That just seems, I don't know. It just seems like a lot to go through for not a guaranteed positive outcome.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
What I mean?
And I think you have to think about this issue of disguising, right? There's going to come a point in time where that's going to get harder and harder and harder. And I think we've all seen people who have been getting Botox and filler when they're in their 40s. And you know what? Yeah, they can look really good, right? It can look, their faces can look refreshed. They can look more youthful. But as time goes on, that tends to change, right? You start to see people's faces looking more plastic, looking more frozen, looking more unnatural. And so as long as you're kind of approaching this from a disguise perspective, as opposed to the approach where you try to strengthen and deal with this in a natural way, you are going to most likely reach a point where that becomes impossible. You can continue to do this, but the disguise is not going to work anymore. It's going to be very obvious what you're doing. It's going to look unnatural. And when that happens, are you in your 60s? Are you in your 70s? Are you in your 80s? It's hard to know. Depends on what people have been doing, what their genetics are, what their natural structure is. But there will come a point in time.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about the people who do the injections, who do these, more invasive procedures. How much knowledge, training, all that stuff do they really have? Because when you're talking about the Botox and I sound so old, the Botox, the gout. No, I'm just kidding. When you're talking about Botox and like the negative impact, or if it's done incorrectly or something like that. I remember when people would have Botox parties.
Botox parties. Yeah. Yeah. So the people are supposed to be trained, right? Legally, they are supposed to be trained and they are supposed to have the medical qualifications in order to do it. It's supposed to be regulated, but it isn't always. And yeah, I mean, like you walk around and you see these shops popping up everywhere, right? Medical spas. And yes. And so the reality is, are these places regulated the way that they should be? I mean, no, we don't have the manpower to monitor all of these. And so is it entirely possible to end up in a situation where you are dealing with a practitioner who is not sufficiently skilled in terms of their experience, doesn't have the medical credentials that they should have? Absolutely. So you need to do your homework on this if you're going to do it. Absolutely.
Yes.
Need to do your homework.
Yeah. And what are some just different alternatives now, right? Because if you're someone, again, so like for me, example, I have no interest in injecting anything into my face just because it makes me nervous. I'll say it. I'm too much of a chicken.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, you also you recognize now that the analysis of the risks and benefits, right? When you do a comprehensive analysis, everyone has to do this for themselves and decide whether it's worth taking those risks. But I don't think that risk benefit analysis is being clearly presented to women. There's no way that it is. And so number one, you do that, and then you make your choice about how to move forward, and then you explore alternatives, right? And see whether those alternatives are satisfactory to you. And you can factor that into your risk benefit analysis if you want to. So, as I said before, it's the difference between a disguise and really working with supporting your own physiology and health. So I look at these as kind of breaking down into a few different categories. So one is your face has muscles just like any other place in your body, right? And you can actually exercise those muscles. So when I really dug into the scientific literature to see what kind of alternatives there could be, face yoga and facial exercises do result in some pretty beautiful effects. So particularly, you can increase the volume of muscles in your cheeks. You can strengthen the muscles in your forehead, which will help to hold the forehead up, hold the eyes up. You can strengthen the muscles in your jaw to change the jawline. So I have if you go on Amazon, there's all kinds of face yoga books. There are face yoga practitioners that can help to teach you this. I bought a book. I haven't started yet, but I've looked at some of the before and after pictures, and they're pretty remarkable. There was one young man who had a bit of a double chin, and with face yoga supporting the jaw and the masseter muscles, really was able to reshape this whole area. So that's one thing that has, there's no downside. There's really only upside to it. Cosmetic acupuncture is also good at supporting the strength of the muscles, and increasing the synthesis of collagen and elastin. There's some good research on that. And then we've got all of our lifestyle factors, right? You need to sleep. If you want your face to look good, I mean, we all know what you look like after you wake up. Remember when, your kids weren't sleeping and someone's up throwing up, and you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you're like, oh my goodness, what happened here, right? So when it comes to lifestyle and your face, sleep is it's indispensable. You absolutely need that there. And hydration. You need water for your skin, right? What happens to your skin you can see it, right? In your hands, especially. You can see it in your face. You need to have adequate hydration, and really need that water that has the sufficient electrolyte balance in it, right? So that you're really getting the water into your cells. And then nutrients. It's the same as any other part of your body, right? You need the nutritional supplementation and sufficiency. And then we really, this is going to sound kind of bizarre, but we look at Fringe, where we have a line of red light products. We really look at light as being an essential nutrient. And now people freak out and they're like, light, what do you mean? The sun is so bad for our skin. And the reality with that is that is a much more complicated story than people have been led to believe. And when we look at the rays of the sun, the only one that is associated with skin damage and aging are the UV rays, right? The UVA and the UVB. So if you're talking about the other light that comes from the sun, by avoiding that, you are missing out on all of these really beneficial wavelengths. And the two that are dominant in the sun and have very profound cellular effects are your red light wavelengths and your infrared light wavelengths, particularly your near infrared. So when you look at the visible spectrum, right, you've got ultraviolet on one end and you've got infrared on the other. And infrared is not visible. We can't see it, but we feel it as heat, whereas red is visible. And so those are really, really dominant in our visible spectrum and from light. So it turns out that our cells love those wavelengths and they create energy when they're stimulated by those wavelengths. And as a result of that energy production, all kinds of downstream things happen. So in terms of your face, we see an increase in the synthesis of collagen, an increase in the synthesis of elastin, regulation of the production of oil, because you do need to produce oil sufficiently from an anti-aging perspective, a regulation in the production of melanin, and so that pigmentation in the skin can be improved. So we've definitely got this big toolbox of non-invasive things that we can do quite easily to support our skin health. I also think that there's some really good evidence for some of the antioxidant topicals. And you can even kind of combine some of those topicals with red light therapy to sort of double whammy increase the absorption at the time. So yeah, those are, we have alternatives. Of course, you're not going to have these really dramatic effects with these natural things. You're not going to go in one day and, walk out with plump cheeks and a forehead that has no wrinkles in it. It's not going to happen like that. It's going to be gradual. It will take place over time. But the research studies that have been done on red light therapy, on cosmetic acupuncture, on face yoga, these things take place over a couple of months. It's not like we're looking at years. Within, 6 to 8 weeks, even less for some studies, people are seeing measurable benefits. And they're measurable in terms of the volume in the face, in the reduction of wrinkles, in the improvement in skin pigmentation. So really noticeable effects. And personally, I can attest to the fact I've been using a red light face mask for a couple of months now. And I absolutely have noticed I feel like there's an increase in the volume in my face. There's better coloration. I haven't had a breakout of any kind for that period of time. So yeah, it's wonderful that we have alternatives and I think that more people should be aware of them.
Yes. Yes. One of the things that I, have conversations with a lot of women about is around your cycle and hydration and how your body holds on to inflammation more at different times of the month, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I love about the red light mask.
Good
is
point.
Because there are some days where I swear you just look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I look puffy today, yeah. Right? And what can you do about it? Easy. Right. I swear you can see, I swear exactly. If I am puffy and again, I am celiac, so I can't eat gluten. So if I eat something and yes. It's a little sus, right. I swear you can see it in my face and it goes down after using it.
Right. And it's interesting that you bring that up because when I do the research and look at the literature on all the things that they're looking at in the face, it's usually those kind of markers that I just mentioned, like the collagen and the elastin and the volume and the wrinkles. But one of the main uses for red light therapy from a rehab perspective is that it decreases inflammation. And so, of course, if you're dealing with that in your face, it will have that effect as well.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, it's one of the, like, because there are some days where you just feel puffy and you don't feel great. But after using something like, and again, the other thing about this that I love, again, I'm a mom of 3. I have 3 kids and myself. Everybody can use this.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
For the price of, instead of doing Botox, one Botox treatment or whatever, because again, just like you said, those are really expensive. You can get something like this.
Yep.
And reuse it again and again and again.
Well, and for the teenagers too that are dealing with acne, right? There's that blue light mode in the face mask, and so the blue light is for blemishes, and the blue light for blemishes, and then the red light, and then the combination of the red and the near infrared. So if somebody is looking at the mask, the bright red, that is just the red wavelength. If you push it again, Beth, and the light goes down, that's the red and near infrared in combination. So what I recommend is that if you're dealing with blemishes, you would want to use the blue light on a daily. So it's programmed for 10 minutes. It'll turn off automatically. You use blue light daily, and then 3 to 4 times a week, you would follow that with either the combined red and near infrared or the red only, because that will help as your skin heals. So red and near infrared light are really good with helping with tissue healing. So if you cut your hand or you have a wound, you can take your face mask and put it right on there. It will absolutely help with to speed up the healing. Now, the difference between the red and the near infrared and red combined, the indication for using the red only would be if you find that the combination of the two is a little too warm. Some people don't like that feeling of warmth on their face. It's a personal thing. If you have melasma, so this is the one indication. Melasma is the skin pigmentation where you get the darker patches of skin. The scientific research supports the use of both red and near infrared light to actually treat melasma and help to normalize the pigmentation. But there are some people who seem to respond to the near infrared, particularly by spots actually getting a little bit darker. So those individuals we would recommend with melasma, we recommend just starting with the red and just start with a few minutes at a time just to see how you respond, because it seems like there's a little bit more individual variation with that particular condition. But people who have eczema, who have psoriasis, there's been amazing improvements with application of both red and near infrared light for those conditions. And so you've got not just your anti-aging benefits, which we, at this point, when we're talking about these healthy, natural things, let's call them pro-aging, because now we've changed our mindset, right? We're not trying to slow down aging. We are just trying to support our health while we age, because that's a normal part of our journey here on this earth.
Yes, I 100% agree. Again, I'm in my early 40s and I just don't feel the need to try and look like I'm 20 because I'm not 20.
No, and that's part of this process too, right? There's this psychological, there has to be an acceptance of the fact that as time goes on, your body's going to change, and that's okay. Your face is going to change, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's not easy in our world. We have we clearly have some problems culturally in terms of how we embrace that. But it just takes us saying no to that, because you have a choice. You really do have a choice to say, I'm not participating in this process, and I'm not taking it on to myself either.
Yeah. Well, and I have 2 daughters, 2 teenage daughters. And these are the things that I think about for myself, right? We do this all the time where we will watch old movies from the 90s or early 2000s or something, and how they talk about diet, how they talk about, oh, I can't eat that today for lunch because I ate too much for breakfast or something, just like little things like that. And then also becoming aware of the aging process. And yep, this is what happens to the body. I want to set a good example for my girls in health and nutrition and dieting and body image. And then also be a really good example in aging that I'm going to embrace and just be as healthy as possible through it and maintain as much as I can.
Well, they see what we do, and I mean, they hear what we say, but what we do is far more important.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love this.
Yes. Well, I have two boys, and one of them has dealt with some pretty bad acne throughout the last couple of years. And he uses red light diligently every day. And then the other one still has pretty much perfect skin, but he still finds it fun to sit with the red light. And so you can use both a red light panel for the application to the face, as well as the face mask. And so those are, there are different ways of using red light therapy to treat the face. The only thing is when you're using a panel and you're sitting in front of it, you have to be stationary because it is plugged into an electrical outlet, right? So, some people like to kind of make that like a little bit of a quiet meditation sort of practice time. You sit in front of it for 10 minutes and just close your eyes. But the portability and the flexibility of the face mask, with it being, a rechargeable battery, and you can put it on, you can move around your house, you can do whatever you want. Some people like that as flexibility and portability is a big convenience factor.
Yes. Well, and sometimes it's those little things that make a big difference in how consistent you are with using it. And I will be totally honest. I have a panel. Yeah, I have a panel and I use it
infrequently.
Yeah. On it. If I'm going to be real honest about it, it's maybe once or twice a month I use it.
Right.
Not that I don't use it. But this, since I've gotten it, I've used it every day. My kids have used it every other day consistently because it's so easy to be like, hey, here, put this on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I find as well. I have a panel and I have several different portable wraps. And the portable wraps are definitely the ones that I find that I go to. The panels are great if you want to use them to light up your room and have an ambient kind of reddish light at night, because that really helps with our circadian rhythm to get rid of that bright light, and that because bright light has a strong blue component to it. And it's that blue light that really, it's wonderful in the morning. It helps you wake up. It has your regulates your circadian rhythm really well. But especially for kids, there was a study that recently showed that they have a dramatically increased response to bright blue and blue light at night, shifts their circadian rhythms by a good 2 hours forward. And we don't want that as parents.
Nope.
No. And you have to think about it. How many kids, like even just going around your house in your daily routine at night with bright lights, televisions, and iPads and phone screens. I mean, that's it, right? Try going to bed after that.
Yeah. Well, and the hard thing now with kids is that their homework is all on the computer.
It's all online. Yeah.
They can't, my kids both have their school district. They have, iMacs or laptops, Apple laptops that they have to do their schoolwork on there. That's how they do it. That's how they submit it. So it's just, it is what it is,
I recommend a very good pair of blue blocking glasses for that. There are some glasses too that will combine the blue blocking with a red or an orange lens. And so that takes a little bit to get used to. And I don't know that the kids would love it, but the blue blocking is great. Just kind of get those on by about, anytime after 6 o'clock. If they're on a device, because light, it's amazing. I mean, if you think we've been billions of years of evolution from the beginning of life here, right?
Yeah.
Has been with exposure, a near constant exposure to light from the sun. And so you have to expect that it's an important regulator of our physiology. And I think we definitely forgot about that with the advent of electricity and the convenience of being able to, go inside, and now working inside and not getting out. I mean, Andrew Huberman talks all the time about the importance of getting out in the morning and getting light into the eyes, right? It's just because it's literally like it would be our most important regulator. And so to learn how to play with those wavelengths and exposure and supporting health, including skin health, decreasing inflammation, recovery from exercise, and wound healing, all kinds of things. There's so much that we can do with light.
Yes, there is. And it's easy, convenient to keep around. So why not?
So why not? Yes, there's no downside. The only thing I would mention about, if you're using light therapy, it is possible to overdo it. Now, what happens when you overdo it is that it's not that there's any adverse effects. There are no adverse effects, as long as you're not using a really high intensity device, which can cause heating. That can be a problem. But our devices are not high intensity. But what happens is you don't have the benefit. So when you look at research studies that look at different, doses of light, what they see is that you have a range in which you have a therapeutic benefit. And if you're too low, you don't get there. And if you're too high, you don't get there. So it's a sweet spot in the middle. And that's what motivated us to develop our products, mimicking the intensity of the sun. So coming in at that, that's exactly what we're trying to mimic. Whereas a lot of companies have gone very high intensity, and a very high intensity device, if used for more than a few minutes at a time, you're going to quickly end up in that range where you're not getting the benefits. So it's not going to, unless it's so intense that it's hot and you're getting that heating effect, you probably won't even realize it. But it's something to keep in mind, because we do tend to, as humans, think that more is better, right? More supplements are better, more exercise is better, more light is better. But that's not the case when it comes to light. It's a moderate exposure at this kind of low, moderate intensity is what's optimal. So we have timers in our devices for that reason. The face mask is programmed to be on for 10 minutes. If you did want to do that dual blemish control with that additional red and near infrared a few times a week, that would give you 20 minutes. That's okay. But a 10-minute treatment time is really optimal for the face. And then for our other devices, we have 20 minutes timer on them, because most of those are kind of going for a deeper penetration.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Yeah. And I love that things are timed. It makes it easy to.
Yeah. You're like, I'm done. It comes off. You don't have to think about it.
Yes. Yeah. So you've taken all the guesswork out of it. It's just.
Exactly. It's supposed to be easy and get rid of the cords, make it portable. And that way people can use it and get the benefit.
Yeah. I love it. So yeah. And I've enjoyed it, using it regularly. I see a difference from using it. My kids have been using it on their skin just for some acne purposes and things as well. And it's been really beneficial.
Yeah. Well, for the kids, a lot of the time, they're not spending much time outside either, right? They're in school all day. They go to their activities at night. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's really, I don't want to say it's never too young to start doing red light therapy on your face, but you probably don't need to do it if you're, under the age of 10. It's not like it's going to be harmful, but there's not necessarily the same need for regulation of oil control and things like that. But yeah, certainly across the lifespan. And I mean, this is what's exciting for people like you and I, being able to start this when we're in our 40s and hopefully over time. And we don't know what's going to happen over time. This hasn't been around long enough to do long-term studies, but hopefully we'll get some as the years go on. And I think they'll be pretty positive in terms of their outcomes.
Yes. Yes. But again, yeah, the adverse side effects, that's the other thing. Adverse side effects, right?
Zero. Yeah.
There aren't really any.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what makes it a no-brainer for me. I have no risk going into it. It's not going to be harmful. And knowing that it's a product, because I know there's other like red light things out there, but knowing that this is one that is, like you said, the sweet spot within the range. That way you're not having to, like, I don't want to do the research myself. I want to get it from somebody who's already done all the research.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to see how this industry has evolved, because there has been this sort of race among these different companies to create these very high intensity products. Whereas when you take a step back and you get into the literature, and that's our approach at Fringe, right? Because we are, I'm a scientific director. I have a PhD that allows me to really explore the scientific research. A lot of companies are more based on creating a product and providing something for consumers. Whereas we're really about education first. And scientific evidence informs us, but as well, clinical practice. We have a lot of practicing clinicians, right, who are getting that day-to-day feedback from their patients and stuff. So yeah, it's I think the industry is probably going to change over time, and people will quietly decrease the intensity of their products. It'll most likely be something that sort of happens subtly behind the scenes. But for now, there are still definitely companies that have upward. So here's an example. The sun is usually between 20 and 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So just think 20 to 40. There are companies that are making products that they claim are 200 milliwatt per centimeter squared. Yeah. It's questionable whether they actually are that high intensity, because if they were, they would most likely be creating quite a bit of damage to the skin. But it's still high. They're still probably up there in the, somewhere between like 60 and 100. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But again, it's this human nature. More is better. It's our tendency to always think more is better. And we haven't quite evolved past that place yet, but I'm hoping that we will.
Yes. Yes.
As we take too much vitamin C and end up in the bathroom, right? More is not better. More is
yes. Not. Oh my gosh. I just had somebody do that last week. Email like, oh my gosh, and I'm having this diarrhea. And so I was like, well, what did you do different? Well, I got this thing and it was really good. It was like a drink with like tons of vitamin C in it.
1,000 milligram vitamin C drinks. Yeah.
Yes. And I was like, whoa. How many did you drink? Because that's a
Well, and this is the challenge that a lot of people face with the gummy supplements, right? Is that gummies taste really good and they can easily be, taken too many of. And like I've caught, when my kids were young and we used to get, a gummy multivitamin. And I realized pretty early on that like they would go and get those and just start eating them. And so I kind of had to shift gear, and I stuck with a gummy, but I got one that didn't taste very good. So it was good enough for them to eat, but not good enough for them to overdo it with. And that's, that's true. Like with the vitamin C drinks and things like that, you can easily get too much.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. So, and again, I love that this is dosed. The red light is dosed the right amount. It's timed. You don't have to worry about it. And again, no adverse reaction. You're not going to have diarrhea from it either.
No, definitely not.
Oh, well, this is great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. This has been amazing. So much information packed into this.
Love talking about this stuff. I think it's important, especially as women of our, in our 40s. I think it's important information for us to have.
Yes. Yeah. And again, as a consumer, just like you said, the beauty industry, I feel like women are targeted so much with this and that and the other thing and this thing coming out. It feels almost like a risk to just be able to do the right thing overall and know that you're doing the right thing and that it's not going to come back and bite you later down the road. Cause like I think about, gosh, I was on birth control for like 10 years when I was younger. I didn't know better. There was no information or there were no books written about it. And now there's like books and there's even this new documentary that had come out, right? Have you seen that?
I haven't, but I'd be interested to see it. And but I do wish that, I wish that knowledge actually had permeated the mainstream, because I still feel like it hasn't.
Yeah. So this is what I love, like having in-depth information where you can learn a lot from someone who is very knowledgeable here. So I really appreciate your time, all the information and everything that you've shared with us today.
My pleasure. It's been fun, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. If you would like more information, just head on over to drbethwesty.com for all the show notes and information from today's episode. And if you're looking for more community, more support, you can find and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and I would love to see you there.